Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Really excited to be with you all today and that we have so many faces here. My name is Hannah Fine, and I'm the community organizer for climate justice at Chazon Detroit. And I'll be co-facilitating this with Ren Hack. So Ren, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ren Hack. I am the director of Chazon Detroit and have the wonderful opportunity to lead our incredible team of 5. So Hannah is going to begin with our overview, and then I'll join you in a little bit.
Yeah. So as you saw in the description, we'll be talking about some of the ways that we at Chazon Detroit have been responding to the pandemic while holding true to our environmental sustainability mandate and really what we do and what we feel passionately about, while also supporting our community in the ways that we know how. So as Ren said, I'll give an overview of what we've been doing, and then we'll dive more deeply into what those things are, and we're happy to take questions. We'll have about 15 minutes at the end to take some questions. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we really jumped in with understanding that because of job loss and because of just the way that the world was turned upside down because of the pandemic, there was a lot of need for food. People became food insecure who hadn't been before, in addition to folks who were already experiencing food insecurity. And what that meant was that emergency food banks and food pantries were just totally overwhelmed by the demand. There was a massive food shortage, and lines at food pantries around the country, and specifically to our work around the Detroit and Metro Detroit area, lines were truly exponentially longer than they had been before by 3-4 times. And so there was a really serious food shortage, and one way that we thought of to address that was we invited our community members to grow food. And we did that by, we provided compost and seeds for folks to grow food at their own homes and use whatever of that they needed to nourish themselves and their families, and then invited them to donate whatever overages they had to their communities, whether that be their neighbor down the street or a pantry. And we provided a list and a map of pantries that they could bring their fresh produce to. So when we initially set out with that, our expectation had been that most people would grow some for themselves, and the majority of what was produced in the home gardens would be donated. And it really drove home the food security issue for us, because we quickly learned that most of the food being grown was being kept in those homes, which was absolutely something that we were glad to be able to provide. And it gave us a perspective just that we hadn't had before. We knew there was a need, and now we were seeing it firsthand from way more families than we had ever expected. Because of that, and because of noticing the severity of the food insecurity, we, in relationship with partners that we've had in the community for a long time, between chefs and farms and community leaders and food justice leaders, we learned that there was also a lot of food rescue going on. And what that food rescue was, is there were, at the beginning of the pandemic, as everything shut down quite abruptly, schools and restaurants and hotels and casinos who had pantries and refrigerators and freezers full of food and no longer had any means of distributing that food. So they were donating it to these chefs and community members. And we were invited into this work by them who were doing this work, and we were asking the questions and seeing how we could be supportive. And what we learned was that there was a lot of food to rescue even once that supply depleted. And that food existed within food banks and amongst pantries and churches and organizations who are receiving food. So, okay, so I just said that there was a shortage of food, and now I'm saying there's extra. How does that happen? What we learned was that a lot of what places were receiving was either not culturally appropriate for their clientele, So they were receiving food that the folks who used that food just simply were uncomfortable using, didn't know how to use, didn't enjoy, and therefore didn't take it, and it would go to waste. And we also learned that sometimes places were just getting, especially as the pandemic waned on, more than they could handle. For example, there's an organization we work closely with who they cook for their community. And they'll prepare meals, people take them home and can eat them safely at home. Though they were getting pallets of bakery items. And said, you know, we simply don't have a place to give these, but we certainly don't want to throw them away. And that's really been the crux of our work since, in terms of food rescue, is that we've built partnerships with, at this point, about 40 organizations, be them churches, food banks, individuals, community members, what have you. We've built those relationships, and we're kind of the middle people who when someone calls us and says, hey, this happened a couple weeks ago, I have a pallet of jalapeno peppers, what do I do with them? We will pick them up and find a home or multiple homes amongst our partners. So yeah, it's rescuing overages, and it's making sure food gets to culturally appropriate sources so that when the food lands at the food pantry, the people who get food from there are able to use it and are able to enjoy it. So between our garden relief initiative and our food rescue work, we've really tried to bolster the amount of food that exists in the market, and also make sure that the food that is floating around in all these different spaces gets to the plates and the mouths that can really use it. And it really addresses for us 3 important topics, and the things that really drive our work, which are the climate. So I've talked a lot about food, and food is very much related to the climate, both in the agricultural system, but also recognizing that whatever food isn't consumed by people is thrown away. And when organic matter, like the food that we eat, ends up in a landfill, it produces methane, and methane is a really dangerous gas in the atmosphere. So we really wanted to divert that food waste, both to feed people for sure, and that's really number one, and a close second is to prevent it from producing methane in our world. And so the climate is one of the 3 main things that's on our mind. Another is the economic toll that this pandemic has taken on community. We at Chazon and at Chazon in Detroit really value the communities that we're a part of, and are very closely connected to them. And so when we see them being hit so hard and hurt so deeply by this pandemic, it feels important to jump in and help where we can. And then also the food shortage that I had mentioned felt like a really necessary thing to address, because the root of general sustainability is personal sustainability, being able to sustain ourselves and to sustain our bodies and our health. So I'm going to start playing a slideshow that'll play in the background of what we're talking about. And in that slideshow, you'll see photos of both food that's been grown and donated, boxes and boxes and boxes of food that we have rescued and redistributed, and some of the faces that help us do it. And at this point, our food rescue operation has rescued over 110 tons of food, which is about 240,000 pounds of food, which just goes to show that our team of 5 being able to rescue that much means that there is so much of this, there's more than we could possibly handle, and it's a big sector to be jumping into, and a really important one. So I'll let Ren go into some more of the details about where it all began and how it relates to our partnerships and the earth and the community.
Thanks, Hannah. Obviously, when you hear Hannah's numbers of over 200,000 pounds, that's such a huge amount. And we did not set out to rescue that. We never dreamed that we would be in basically the food rescue business. But because of the pandemic, because of our space within the community as environmental sustainability as having some key deep partnerships. We believed for us that it was something we could not ignore nor stay away from. And so it began very small. And as Hannah mentioned, we began first working with warehouses and restaurants. They would call us or call one of our partners and say, hey, listen, I've got cases of salad dressing that is going to be shortly out of date. Can you use them? Can you get them somewhere that can? And that grew to slowly. It grew to, first we were talking about taking boxes, then we were talking about taking cases, then we began talking about taking pallets. And we now on average we pick up typically 3 pallets a day. We, as Hannah mentioned, we distribute to over 40 different pantries, and that's throughout the city of Detroit, throughout Oakland County. We go into Genesee County, Livingston County. And for those of you who are out of the state, that is hundreds, kind of means hundreds of miles of driving. So my job that used to be a desk job is now a truck job. I started out using my pickup truck and outgrew that, and very thankfully we received a grant from our county to allow us to rent a high-rise cargo van, and we now use that. You can see that's actually, you're seeing now the slide of the salad dressings that we picked up. I thought we were going for a few boxes, and ultimately it became, as you see, a truckload. We are now almost at the bottom of that. But that was something that was, though it sounds like minimal, that it was salad dressing. Salad dressing, that happens to be mucky duck salad dressing. Those of you on the East Coast may know of that name. It's a fancy salad dressing. It runs almost $6 a bottle. And that's something in this period of time that people just can't afford. For many people, when the pandemic started, they were concerned about, can I pay the rent? Where am I going to go to my savings? And now it's literally, am I going to eat or am I going to pay the gas bill? And that's, we actually have partners, actual partners who have food pantries who are without heat right now and without running water. And these are partners who are providing food for others as well as themselves. But the pandemic has gone on so long and the economic shortages have gone on so long that that's what we're now facing. People are literally have no running water or have no electricity. I spoke to one of our ministers this morning who was able through United Way to get a small grant for himself, and he took his first hot shower in over a week because he had no gas in his home. And this is a man that is serving over 125 families. And so the work that we're doing, what we believe is, as we call ourselves the Lab of Sustainability, at one time it was environmental. We were talking about LED lighting and solar, and which was all so wonderful and so necessary. But this period has caused us to bring sustainability to the most basic of levels. How do we sustain life? How do we sustain our community? How do we sustain our partnerships, our businesses? And so the pictures you're seeing are literally food that we pick up, we move around. These are some of the pictures of pantries actually distributing. That's a picture of Hannah, our 2 Hannahs, Hannah and Hannah, at a farm that we actually took over from one of our partners. They weren't using it this year. And so we asked them, it was summer in the city, And because they weren't having youth typically do internships in the summer and they work outside because of the pandemic, they weren't able to do that. So we asked them to be able to take over the farm. They graciously offered it to us. And so Hannah Fine, who's with us today, is our main farmer, and has been able to take pounds and pounds out of there and be able to give it to our local partners, actually our even local chefs who have converted their businesses into just mainly community feeders. And that's been wonderful to not only show people the work in terms of the food rescue, as you see, that we can do, but that we can grow for ourselves. And as Hannah mentioned, it was crucial at the beginning when we started. We really believed that we needed to give people the ability to grow for themselves. And the garden relief we delivered to over 400 families. And that was, as she said, it was so enlightening to understand that what we thought was originally, oh, we're going to give it to all these people and they're going to grow food a little bit for themselves, but they're going to have so much to give to Pantries. And then as we were delivering and as we were having conversations, to understand that these people actually needed it for themselves. And we actually followed that up with a fall grow program, which was our, I can't even remember what we actually called it, but it was, let's say, our fall garden relief, where instead of giving people just compost and seeds, we actually provided them with a new opportunity to grow, which was we provided them with a grow bag. And I don't know if any of you are aware of grow bags, but I suggest you look into them. They are a wonderful opportunity to grow when you don't necessarily have land or have the time to work with your land, or within your communities, schools, synagogues. We've used them in a variety of places. And what they are typically a felt 10-gallon or 5-gallon bag with handles. They can be quite sophisticated. We use the very simple, cheap kind. And this year we delivered, with those grow bags, we delivered soil that we had donated, as well as compost, as well as fall growing seeds. And we delivered to anyone who asked, as well as we worked with a local synagogue who used them as their first school project coming into the high holidays. As they greeted the families, they gave them their synagogue package, but then they also gave them a grow bag from us with not only, as I mentioned, the compost, soil, and seeds, but also a variety of activities that they could do at home. And what that allowed people to do is, one, understand that the growing season does not end in August, and that we have that opportunity to continue growing and continue putting food into the system. So it was key for us to try. It was a new program for us. We'd never done anything in the fall. One of the projects that we did last year with the grow bags that I highly recommend for any of you is to grow potatoes in a bag. Potatoes typically take a lot of space, and if you grow them in a bag, you can literally get about 10 pounds of potatoes from any given grow bag. And last year we used it with a synagogue. Their youth group came together, planted a bag for the synagogue, planted a bag for themselves. They then, at the end of the season, potatoes don't need a lot of care. They're fairly easy to grow, so they didn't need a lot of overseeing. But come September, end of September, beginning of October, their early childhood center actually harvested those potatoes and saved them and used them to make latkes for Hanukkah. So it was kind of a full cycle of growth, as well as to go into food. Now we're actually growing those potatoes. Hannah's growing potatoes at the farm. I'm growing potatoes at my home, my farm, and the plan is to give those potatoes to the community. So it's, there's so many things that we can actively do, and so many things that with a little ingenuity we can make it easier for people. But the food rescue uh, is just, I cannot tell you enough how necessary it is. And I don't care what community you are in, it is needed right now. We have West Bloomfield, which is one of our higher income communities, has a synagogue in it, in which started out they wanted to participate in food rescue in some form or fashion. They wanted to be able to give back to the community. They created a pantry. They started out their first week with 4 families, and they were saying, "Oh, this is a why are we doing this? There really isn't that need." They now serve over 50. Today is a day that they give out food. They're serving over 50 families, and they have 20 on the waiting list, of which they're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to serve this many? And I can trust you, there'll be 20 after that, and 20 after that. And this is in a community that is considered, you would normally consider it not a needing community. But these times have created need for everybody. Everybody's been impacted in some form or fashion. And I believe Hazone we have a real place in it. As Hannah mentioned, if we can move food away from the landfills and bring it to people who need it. That pantry in West Bloomfield uses only rescued food. So they are feeding people 50 families with rescued food. Today, they're getting pounds of hamburger. We rescued over 800 pounds of hamburger last week, completely unexpectedly. Just got a call, 2 calls. Hey, we got 400 pounds of hamburger that we can't freeze or refrigerate. Can you come pick it up? Then the next day, hey, we got 400 pounds of hamburger. And of course, our challenge is so much fun. What Hannah did not tell you is she is our logistics person. So she gets to be the one to figure out where we're putting it, where we're sending it. And I will tell you, as being one of 3 drivers on the road continuously, she gets on minimum 20 calls, at least from me, a day, saying, Hannah, where am I going? Or Hannah, it used to be, Hannah, I don't know where I am. I don't know which pantry you want me to go to. Is it Good Hope? Is it Hope of Peace? Is it where? And she very patiently works with us and guides us through this myriad of need and pantries and real heroes who are out there doing this incredible work. We're not the heroes. We, as she said, we're the middlemen. We simply move food. We're fortunate enough to have the ability to move food from one place to another. We're fortunate enough to be able to create, initiate, and execute programs. But the real heroes are the people, as I mentioned to you, like the minister, who saw a need in his community, answered it, but in the meantime is also food insecure himself. And there are so many grassroots pop-up pantries that have been created. We have somebody, April, who's in Redford, who started it out of her garage. And there were so many cars lining up that the neighbors complained, and she ended up moving to a high school. She now serves well over 500 families a week. Another one in our Orthodox Jewish community, who literally, again, serving over 250 families every week out of her garage. And it's amazing. To me, those are the heroes, the people who selflessly have answered the call of their neighbors. And the wonderful thing about that is that they know who's in need. And they're also, because they're living in the community, people feel more, they can put their pride aside and step into their neighbor's garage and help themselves to food, or when they see a neighbor come to them with a bag, they can say, oh, okay, great, thank you so much. There's still the pride out there. Minister Antonio has one family of which in the dark of night he slips around their back door and drops off a couple of bags of food every week, because the pride is so strong from this elderly woman.
And
And
I
this,
think I want
go ahead.
to
Yeah,
lift
yeah.
up from this is that a word that we've used repeatedly, and I truly don't think we can overuse in this context, is community. And that is that we were able to step into this work because of connections and relationships that we've built over the years. As I mentioned, with chefs and farms and community organizers and people all over. And that's proven to be really crucial in that we started with maybe 4 of those connections being involved in food rescue, and then one person talks to another, who talks to another, who talks to another, and all of a sudden we're serving over 40 pantries, organizations, homes, and that's been something that has really solidified our belief that relationship must precede the work, in that without these relationships to begin with, we may not have ever known that this work needed to be done. And it's felt really important. The woman in Redford, April, who Ren mentioned, who started in her garage and is now at a high school serving over 500 families, she was a contact that we gained from another contact, and now it's really a very reciprocal relationship, and that we'll get a call from person A saying, hey, we have extra of this, do you want some? Also, I know that this person could use it, could you put some in your truck and bring it to them, since we do have a large vehicle that we're fortunate to be able to fit things in. And another connection of ours, a pantry that really, this one just came out of a cold call, because we wanted to serve that community and we didn't have any connections so far north for where we usually work. And they had called one day and said, look, we know of a big box store who is no longer getting pickups from a place that usually picks up excess food and gives it to food banks, because their 3 pallets of extra food wasn't enough to warrant a pickup. That's just how great the need is. And they said, can you take care of it? And that's where Ren had mentioned we pick up from a box store about 3 pallets on average of 4 times a week. So that's roughly 12 pallets a week of perfectly good, perfectly usable and really nice fresh food that we're able to distribute. And it's all about those phone calls and those relationships and meeting people where they're at physically, meaning being able to get to where they are and to serve them in that capacity, and also to understand that everyone's, again, as Ron mentioned, everyone's been hit by this in different ways, some people harder than others, and it's an unfortunate situation. And so to be able to support folks in getting their most basic needs met is imperative. And it's also, so that's kind of the food rescue side of things. And then as Ren spoke a lot to the garden relief initiative side of things, it's been really empowering for folks to be growing for themselves. Because one, there's certainly that pride of not wanting to ask for help. It can be embarrassing. There can be that stigma. And at many pantries, there's a lot of questions and hoops folks have to jump through, which can feel very uncomfortable. And sometimes there's simply barriers that, if you don't have a state ID, you're disqualified from some places. And so to remove that barrier altogether and just say, hey, you can provide for yourself, has felt really empowering to folks. And I also want to name, not everyone is a seasoned grower. Some people have never grown something in their life, maybe a weed, but that might be it. And we've gotten responses from people saying, like, I never knew I could grow, and all of a sudden I have a bounty bigger than one that I can eat. And so I do want to share an email from somebody with you, someone who participated in the Relief Garden Initiative and got that compost, got a grow bag, and got some seeds, and sent us this email, which I will warn you, I think the first line is great. So the email starts with, okay, Chazon, you win. When I heard that you thought people would donate vegetables from their garden, I thought you were nuts. Obviously, I planned to eat what I was growing. I thought there was no way that my little garden could grow more than I would consume, but I was wrong. I brought some veggies to a community partner, and it was such a positive experience. It was a great opportunity to teach my son about tzedakah firsthand, show him how we give the nicest veggies, and for him to see an organization that is working to help its community, and gain a positive view of people who have less. The weather was nice, so I put the boys in the bike trailer with the veggies and we biked over. The boys felt so welcomed at this community partner, Auntie Nays, and loved seeing the goats and chickens. It was really cool to see everything they were doing to help the community, and I'm glad that someone will get to enjoy our extra produce. We brought them zucchini, tomatoes, and arugula. Tomatoes are my favorite, and the boys love them too, so I usually don't have enough to share. But thanks to your compost, I'm having a huge crop and could spare some. Thanks for the hookup. And so it's things like that that really reminded us of how empowering it is to grow. And as she said, she's like, yeah, right. I'm going to have, not only am I going to successfully grow things, but I'm going to have enough to share. And she's like, oh, I really did. And so we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, both from folks who are growing and also from pantries who have received what they're growing. Also recognizing that while a vast majority of the food that we're giving feels, it's nice food. We're not giving rotten food to people. We're not giving food that we ourselves wouldn't eat. There's a lot of dignity involved in this work, but especially giving folks farm fresh, healthy, nutritious food is very dignifying, and that this is food that if you bought it at the store would be quite expensive. We also have a partner. There's a camp, Tamarack Camp, which is about an hour from where we're based, and because camp wasn't running this summer, the farm that they have, who usually produces for the camp, has an excellent farmer who produces a lot of produce and was like, hey, could you guys use it? And so each week we go up there and take a harvest of, again, beautiful, organically grown, nutritious produce, and we're able to give it to folks who may not have access to that otherwise.
Which that actually raises, this has not always been easy. We continue to be faced with challenges regarding the food that we're picking up or receiving or getting calls from. And speaking of Camp Tamarack, they actually agreed to keep the farmer on. They had laid off much of the camp staff, but in our discussions with them, they agreed to keep the farmer on so that it would enable them to continue to actually utilize the farm, grow produce, and give out to the community. So a huge shout out to them, because that has produced hundreds and hundreds of food. But one of our many challenges that we faced was farmers often determine what they grow. They don't ask us. And one of the things that they grew was kohlrabi. Well, I had never experienced kohlrabi. I had no clue what it was. I think Rabbi Nate on our staff was the only one who had had it. He had had it in Israel. And Hannah's job is to find someone to take it. And that was a little challenging because most people did not recognize kohlrabi. And she had sent me to our Muslim Family Services to be able to do a drop off. And I happened to be talking to the executive director, and we were just kibitzing back and forth. And I said, oh, gosh, we're trying to figure out what to do with kohlrabi next. And she's like, kohlrabi? I know who uses kohlrabi. That's our Bengali community uses kohlrabi. And she's like, we'll take all the kohlrabi you have. And I'm like, the Muslim Family Services is going to take the kohlrabi for the Bengali community, which is what out of a challenge, out of the many challenges we've faced, what we've seen is that the boundaries don't exist in food insecurity and in food rescue and in reaching out to communities. The boundaries of religion, the boundaries of color, the boundaries of economics, they're not there for people who are really invested in this. um, we often talk. I was up in the northern part of our county, um, which has perhaps different political views than myself, different religion than myself. And we were talking, it's the fire department is the distributors to that community, because that's who can do it. And we were talking about the fact that in none of our discussions has faith or politics or race ever come up. It's all about, oh my gosh, this is wonderful, this community, the senior group is going to love this, or oh my gosh, Holly is going to be screaming about this food. And it's really been wonderful, especially in this kind of political season that we're in, to be able to go anywhere and not have those barriers come into place. And it's also wonderful to realize that everybody is willing to help anybody. I don't know, of all of our 40, I don't know anybody who would say no to anyone. And that's what's, we may get very discouraged by what is going on in the news, but when you're on the ground, it reminds you that we're good people. We're going to be all right. We just have to remind ourselves of that and get back to the basics. And so, Hannah, I hand it back to you, because I've got one more thought, but I can't remember what it is. So I'll give it to you.
Well, yeah, what I was going to say is just kind of wrapping that thought up of, again, working in community and recognizing that everyone's been hit, and some to different degrees, and some communities to different degrees. I know one of our partners, toward the beginning truly of the pandemic, when it hit hard in Detroit, Detroit is a city that's 83% Black. And as we know, the Black community has been hit disproportionately hard by COVID. And one of our partners, who is distributing food, personally lost 14 family members to COVID-19. And so while we're talking about that love and that holding each other and that supporting each other, it's really, it's deep work, and food is deep work. Food is deeply personal, whether it's making sure that it's culturally appropriate for the recipients, or making sure that they're nourished in order to be as healthy as they can, especially during this time. And also to recognize that economics has been hard, and there's a lot that's been hard, but also some people, just that love, that extension of seeing someone's humanity, is especially powerful when things are so fragile. And so, Ren, I don't know if you've remembered your thought, but I also do want to open it up to questions after.
Yeah, no, I think let's hit some of these questions. And Hannah knows me so well in that my memory somewhere in this pandemic, it was never so great, but in this pandemic, it's especially not good. So the thought may come back to me, or it may not, and no matter. Somebody had asked in our chat about obtaining a grow bag. We use 24/7 grow bag. It's 24, literally 24/7, the numbers, if you Google it. We have found them to be the best price. They come in packs of 5. And like I said, there are fancy ones. There are ones with little trap doors on the bottom of them. Don't waste your money. You can dig down and get your potatoes. You don't need the little, but that said, you can get the fancy one if you want. But especially if you're buying in bulk, we use 24/7. As Hannah said, to open it up to questions. One thing I will say is we are now communicating with other communities. Specifically right now, we're working in Minneapolis to help them recognize that they too anybody can do food rescue. And what we're doing now is recognizing that for other communities to do this, it requires a lot of logistics, a lot of data building. We've done this. We know we've got it down to a system, And so what we've been starting is, how do we as Hazone support other communities in doing rescue? And we're not talking about getting other communities to get up to 200,000 pounds of food. We're not, unless somebody's interested in doing that, we're not there to support that. What we're there to do is talk to either the individual or the individual pantry and saying, listen, when you have overages, rather than throwing it out, which I will tell you, there are pantries, they are throwing it out because they do not have the resources or the staffing to be able to do anything with it. So it is going into the dumpster. And our hope is that with what we have gained, that we can share it. And so what we have prepared to do, and as I mentioned, we're using Minneapolis as a first stop. But if anybody on this Zoom call is interested in the work, is wishing to do something with it, call us. I'm in a truck all day long. I can talk. Hannah can talk unless I'm calling her to say, where am I or where am I going? But we're really happy to help people in any way. First, feed people. Second, keep it from the landfills, please. When we get out of this pandemic, we have slid terribly, terribly far backwards in regards to our environment. And sadly, we are only, we're losing ground. And we all know this. It's whether it's the fires in California, the glaciers melting, the hurricanes. As we can't take a lot of action right now, but there are things that we can do. So what I ask of you is do what we can, please. And it can be small, but it does make an impact. Like I said, we thought, moving boxes was a big deal. Who knew that, those were going to be now pallets. So Hannah, I leave it to you to open up for questions.
Yeah, for sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, Liana or Nitsan, but feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question or type it in the chat.
Or comments or.
So you can't unmute yourself. However, you can put it in the chat for everyone to see.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. So in case, as people are perhaps putting in questions or just wondering, one of the questions that we're often asked is, what's our plan going forward? Are we going to continue with this food rescue? Is this what Hazone Detroit is going to be? And one of the partnerships that we created is with a gentleman actually who is a director of a funeral home who has a passion for food rescue, and who we were actually in communication with prior to the pandemic hitting. And we have continued to work with him and are, in a sense, building him up. We are introducing him to our partners. We are having conversations with him in terms of race relations, relationships before task, any of that. And our plan is that come spring or summer, depending on our grant funding, that he will step in and take the lead. We are presently in the lead, and he is following behind. He's a great help to us, but obviously his main job is working in a funeral home. But by spring or summer, the hope is that he will step up, and we will then just merely be support. And we most definitely need to get back to the environmental work. And while we're doing that still, we're going to need to change the focus and the intent. There was a question about commercial composting in Detroit. Oh, yes. There is some wonderful composters in Detroit. Hannah, what's Tim's last name? Campbell is a composter. He actually works with a number of our seal sites. He will pick up from residences and businesses. During the pandemic, we were able to connect him with one of our food production companies who actually, we are able to give them extra pallets of tomatoes or peppers or whatever, because they make salsas and all these things. And he was looking for somebody to compost, and so we were able to give him Tim's name. They've connected. They now pick up. He's reduced his trash by probably 40%, and he also the company is called Feast Detroit. They have, unbeknownst to us, when we were giving them tomatoes, we didn't know they were actually going to make tomato soup for us. So we have picked up well over 600 packages of tomato soup, which we have in reserve, waiting for the cooler months. One of the first deliveries went out today to the pantry in Colomay. And so there's also Tut Hill, which is a huge composting, and they do food composting, they do leaf composting. They are here in South Lyon, so they do an enormous setup. So there you have to go. But I know for those of you in New York, I truly feel your pain in regards to New York no longer being able to pick up compost. I think that's it's a shanda, but it's the realities, and I think we're going to see it more often. But please find those local composting sites, and also compost yourself, please. There are many ways. Reach out to us. There's African Keyhole gardening, which allows you to have a compost in the middle of your garden. There's hugel culture that again, you build basically on top of compost. So there's many ways to utilize the compost right where you are. You could put it in a trash can. You can do urban worm farming. There's many ways. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We love talking to people about this. We love giving people ideas as to what they can do. And it's fun and it's rewarding. Hannah, back to you, Hannah.
Yeah, I'm into that. And yeah, really excited and feeling energized by the chat also. If you're able to look at the chat and haven't yet, definitely recommend it. People are doing some awesome work, and I think the best and most accessible way to start is to start small. As Ron was saying, to compost at your own home. I know there's a post in the chat about that, and it grows from there, whether it's composting, which literally will grow from there, or helping out neighbors who could use some support food-wise, or noticing where that need is and where those opportunities are in your own community. Lots of opportunity for sure.
Also, huge shout out to Morel with Jewish Earth Alliance. In this political season, please check out Jewish Earth Alliance. We have used them in our community with our synagogues who are wishing to do something on the political end and to lend their voices to it. So please reach out to them if you are interested in letter writing. There's working with the earth, kind of working below the surface, working above the surface, and working spiritually. So let us also not forget the spiritual end of things. We have all got to keep positive and hope and pray for a better world for all.